Todd, it's time to talk about definition of done, the commitment made to the increment. You've got a great anchoring thought here. Can you walk through this with us and help us break it down?
Yeah, so the definition of done, a commitment to the increment, as you said, and really a big important piece right here. This is a formal description of the state of the increment, right? This tells us when we say increment and we're showing an increment, what it means as far as quality, right? So the definition of done, really, it's kind of like a checklist. When we say we're done with something, this is what it means. It's kind of an interesting concept, right, Ryan? Because my definition of being done with something and your definition of being done with something could really vary, sometimes wildly vary, right? And so this is a common understanding of the Scrum team. When I use the word done, this is explicitly what it means. When we say we're done and that PDI meets the definition of done, that increment is born, this is exactly what it means. Is it in production? Is it in stage? Have I checked it in? Right? What Scrum does require is that an increment is usable. So our definition of done should represent completedness as far as usability is concerned.
Yeah, this alignment is so critical. I remember as a developer, just very quickly, a project manager once came to me and said, "Hey, are we done?" And I said, "Yes," but I had only just gotten things kind of working. Still on the development machine, wasn't really promoted to QA or production. And this project manager got super excited and called a bunch of meetings. And when it came time to show the work, it was barely running on my laptop. It wasn't really in any state to be shown. But since I said done and he heard done, what I said and what he heard were two very different things. It led to a lot of confusion. The stakeholders were kind of upset. It led to a mess. And so in Scrum, done is this formal description of the state of the increment when it meets the quality measures required for the product. And we all understand what that means, right?
And when you're saying this word comes to mind.
Transparency. Yeah, absolutely.
Transparency around what done means. And transparency, not only within the Scrum team, right? Transparency of the word done between the Scrum team, but transparency when it comes to the Scrum team and stakeholders, Scrum team and organization, that when we say done, this is exactly what it means. And, as we mentioned in our video, when we were talking about the pillars of empiricism, it requires trust and transparency around level of completedness. This definition of done is really important in creating trust and creating transparency around what we're doing and when we say we're done, what it actually means.
Absolutely. A big part about done is going to be testing, Todd. I think that's something that we need to say right at the forefront. Testing is a required aspect of Scrum, and the definition of done makes it so. Integration, we've talked about how each PBI builds on the next. So integration is important. But something that I really want to highlight is that it's not just technical considerations, right? It could be training videos, for example. Right? Everything that you would have to have done in order to say complete. Right? I want you to think about definition of done as completedness, as usable, right? And that does not necessarily mean just the testing, the integration, and the coding aspects of the work. It could mean so much more than just the technical side.
Yeah, for you non-software development people out there, right? When you say you're done with something, let's say in marketing, we're done with a campaign. What does it mean to be done with a campaign, right? What are the things that go into being done with this little tiny corner of the earth of maybe something that you're doing for a campaign, right? And so kind of circling back to this big concept, how complete are we? It represents completedness. It may just be a checklist, right? That represents completedness. But it's formal. It's a commitment. It's a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets the quality measures required for the product.
Right. And this will become very apparent in our sprint review discussion when we're working with stakeholders and users and customers and all the people involved and interested in the outcome of our work. They all need to understand together what done means. This brings that transparency. But this is something that's also inspected and adapted regularly in our sprint retrospective, which we'll discuss coming up. So this is also emergent as the Scrum team learns about its capabilities. Hopefully they're able to add more quality aspects into the product. And so the definition of done becomes stricter over time. And that's a good thing to see in a team as well. And that decision is usually made during the sprint retrospective. So lots of great things here.
I do have one other thing to add, Ryan. This is defined by the Scrum team.
Yes.
Unless unless it is defined by a broader org and inherited. That means that if you're working in a larger organization and there's multiple teams perhaps working on the same product, there might be a single definition of done for those teams that is inherited. Otherwise, it is defined by the Scrum team.
Absolutely.
There was a last-minute ad there that I wanted to make sure that we covered.
And I think it's a last-minute ad that I'll make to the last-minute ad. It is defined by unless it's defined by the broader organization. Now, the Scrum team can make the organizational definition more strict, but it cannot diminish or circumvent or work around that definition. So they must respect that definition from the org as they build out the rest of their definition of done.
Love it.
Right. That is the commitment that we make to the increment. That wraps up our discussion of the artifacts. In the next video, we begin our discussion of the Scrum events. We'll see you there.